Good evening. My name is Michael Kraus, and I teach in political science in the political science department. It is my pleasure to welcome Jan Machacek here this evening. Jan Machacek is an award-winning journalist, currently working as a commentator for the Prague daily called Hospodarske noviny, which I believe is co-owned by Handelsblad and Wall Street Journal, much like foreign-owned, much like many Czech, in fact, most Czech newspapers. He has had a very unusual career before he became what he is today. As students in my course on East European politics know from this morning's visit in our class. During the 1980s, Machacek was involved in underground culture and in underground publishing in communist Czechoslovakia. He was, in fact, a member of today a legendary underground music band called the Plastic People of the Universe, which was recently brought back in, as it were. I was recently in Prague, and the National Theatre presented Tom Stoppart's latest play called Rock and Roll, and it is indirectly about the plastic people of the universe, but the very real plastic people of the universe actually showed up and performed in the National Theatre of all places. Mr. Machacek is a guitar player. He later joined the band called Garage, with which he still performs in his spare time. In the 1980s, he also signed Charter 77, which was a founding document of what would become the longest-running human rights movement in communist Europe, and he was involved in various opposition activities. Soon after the 1989 revolution, he joined together with other people from underground publishing to create the first independent media outlet in the country called Respect, which was an investigative weekly. And he received numerous awards and recognition for his investigative stories. In 2000, he became deputy editor-in-chief of this paper before moving on to Hospodarske noviny, where he is today. Apart from doing what he does in the world of journalism, he also serves on the board of Transparency International in the Czech Republic, which is an organization that monitors corruption levels all over the world. And he also teaches in the program of the New York University in Prague. I'm delighted to welcome him here today. He is going to talk on the subject of democracy, institution building, and the rule of law in Central and East Europe. Before I invite you to welcome him here, I just wanted to mention that I understand some of you are planning on attending the 8 o'clock program of Georgian dance and music, and certainly you're welcome to leave at the time when you deem appropriate. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Machacek here.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for invitation and also for introducing me as a rock and roll musician, which I don't look like at this moment. So I'm maybe disappointed because I'm going to have this maybe dry, like political analysis lecture. So though you would find it like too dry, you can ask me about things about my life which might be more entertaining for you. So originally I wanted to draw quite critical, maybe a little bit gloomy view of the development of politics in Central Europe. But sometimes there are good news coming, so I think the news from Poland about the results of elections there is a very good and positive sign that things can change to the better, because I think that government of these twins, Kaczynski's brothers there, was like really feeding nationalism, xenophobia, antagonistic policies, and I think like too moralistic, like theocratic attitudes. Both of these brothers represent kind of people who, even though they have a dissident path, they are not anyhow like worldly and open to the world. They don't speak languages. They don't have any interesting knowledge. So the sort of landslide result and victory for liberals who would be more cooperative within the European Union and more open to the world, more rational in their attitudes. I can imagine that some of the people would disagree with me, because Kaczynski's brothers definitely also have their fans, but there are also good news coming. So first, at the beginning of my lecture, I would like to speak about similarities in current development of all the countries in Central Europe, besides Baltic countries, which are doing very well, and as are almost Scandinavian in their attitude, that they are hardworking, they don't have much corruption, they are growing excellently, and they have smart, educated governments. And I'm not going to talk about Slovenia, which is also doing very well, but to be honest, I don't even know much about Slovenia, because their situation is very peculiar. For them, it's always more important to sort of get united, and for Slovenians, the main enemy always have been stronger Slavic brothers like Croats or Serbs. So they definitely have many old communists in the government, etc., but they don't seem to be minded at all. It's a very like disciplined country. It's a little Austria, I would say, even though they speak Slavic languages. So I'm going to speak about Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Czech Republic. So similarities, I would mention a few points. What I think is these are going to be negative points that I'm mentioning. Most of them have negative connotations. I think that after becoming full members of the European Union, the policies in all these countries became much more relaxed and much less disciplined than before. So whereas all these countries were working hard to make it into the European Union and to bring some discipline into legislative process and to fulfill certain criteria, and their governments were like working hard. After the membership, you can see that most of the governments, all the governments in all these countries relaxed. Reform are more slowed down. There is less transparency in legislative process. So, but also, since there are money coming, and there will be money coming from European Union for infrastructure, it has a very strange impact on the structure of budget in all these countries, because since the governments believe that there is some money for building the highways and some money even to the universities will come from the European Union, politicians are spending money for not very smart pre-electoral gifts, which are mainly like increasing mandatory social expenditures, but which are not anyhow like social in their substance. It's just like gifts. So that's one thing. It is, we can see it in all these countries I am talking about. Another thing is lack of any consensus building in politics. Politics are increasingly growing like very antagonistic in all these countries. You have unforgiven camps of left-wing, right-wing, maybe, but we will come later that it does to the fact that it doesn't have any like real. It's losing the real content. So politicians are not cooperative in their fields, which taxpayers are paid them to be cooperative, because there are certain things in policies which must seek sort of wider consensus, like pension reform, healthcare reform, all these kind of reforming of school system. So politicians are only like blaming each other, and but on the other hand, they are cooperating on the things in which we don't want them to cooperate. So to give you an example, for instance, in Prague, there is a plan to organize Olympic Games, and already politicians are spending a lot of money. And these normally unforgiving camps, which really like hate each other and almost don't talk to each other, work on organizing Olympics together. They also like cooperate in all these kind of pork barrel spending. After the budget is approved in first reading, then you have these brotherhoods across the political spectrum for spending here, spending there. Also, like there are like across the political spectrum brotherhoods in legislations which are, for instance, to give you an example, we had a law which was supposed to, according to which the managers of semi-state-owned enterprises are supposed to disclose their salaries individually. It was changed at the last moment that they will have to do it only like as a board, as a whole, so people disclose it. But it was changed at the last moment by the brotherhood in the parliament, which goes across the political spectrum. So it's, by the way, another sign which is typical for all these countries, that even though all these countries have governments, these governments are usually weak. So there are these moments of total like disobedience in parliament, where politicians create these brotherhoods across the political spectrum, and they change legislations with amendments at the last moment, definitely based on some lobbyism, maybe even corruption. Another sign which is very typical for all these countries is that opposition is threatening to cancel the reform or legislative steps which are being put in place by the current governments. This is already, to give you an example of Slovakia. Slovakia is an example of country where it is already happening. Slovakia had very courageous, reform-minded governments last 8 years, but current government, which consists of socialists and this was promising to dismantle all the reform steps. To give you an example, the previous government introduced a system of symbolic payment for visiting the doctor. It was like $2 for visiting a doctor, so it's really large symbolic payment, which is supposed to discourage people to go to the doctor so often, because the system of healthcare is very wasteful and very expensive. So the opposition promised that they will cancel it. They actually really did cancel it. So systematically, it doesn't make sense. What would make sense that if you have payments for the doctor, the opposition would lower these payments, or government would make these payments higher. But if you introduce a new system and then it is dismantled, it's very costly for the society. But so also in Slovakia, they came with a special court which is supposed to fight against corruption. Also, they are connected to it like special office of the attorney, and they moved out of capital, which is also very important. The special court is full of people, of young lawyers, who a lot of them are, by the way, educated here in Harvard and in other prestigious universities, very good institutions. This government is working hard to dismantle this special court. With pension reform and healthcare, in the healthcare system, the government is also introducing steps to the system in healthcare. They have like special insurance companies, so the government wants to create one insurance companies, etc. So it's very costly, these policies, and very antagonistic policies, because you introduce some reform steps and then comes a new government, it dismantles it, and then comes another government that introduces it again. So I think for countries in Central Europe, it would definitely be much better if they would at least try a little bit to copy smart Scandinavian countries which are really trying to build consensus in important fields. And without canceling political competition, obviously. It's usually when I write a column like that, even from my colleagues, we argue, they say, you want to cancel political competition. I say, I don't want to cancel political competition. I'm just like proposing more smart consensus building in my articles. So it's not that Scandinavia is anyhow socialistic. These countries maybe are a little bit socialistic, but definitely they are trying to work hard to find a consensus where it is smart to have a consensus. So all the Central European countries are going out of this model. What is also very typical that politicians are attacking the institutions of the rule of law or of the constitutional system of all these checks, balances, which they didn't sort of control themselves, or didn't name people to the positions themselves there. So it's very typical in Poland, and Kaczynski's brothers were attacking the courts, attacking the state attorneys, attacking the constitutional court. In our country, it is typical that our president is at the constitutional court if he dislikes quite harshly attacking the constitutional court for deciding in not according to his will, we should say. And so whereas the politicians should be helping people to build a trust after 40 years of communism into new institutions of democratic state, they are like attacking these institutions. I think when I was talking about antagonistic policies, that the most unhappy example currently is Hungary, that society is really deeply divided there. There are, even across the families, people don't speak to each other. And across the country, in a funny way, that Budapest, like a capital, is considered to be a sin city, you know, full of socialists and left-wing people, whereas the countryside is more maybe it's in a little bit ways similar to what we know from here. But there is then there is a thing which is not typical for all these countries, but it's typical for Slovakia and Hungary. There is especially in Hungary, there are very growing, dangerous signs of growing nationalism, even because the right-wing parties are not able to sort of cut themselves off the extremists, of the supports of extreme right-wing parties. So there are even attempts in Hungary these days that there are like armed units of extremist political parties, and we all remember that was the beginning of the bad development. No, we don't. I don't remember it because I was in 1965. But that was the beginning of bad development that led to these horrors of the Second World War and Holocaust and everything, that political parties had their, that sort of the system tolerated that political parties had their armed units. So we have signs of it like emerging in Hungary, where extremist parties are supporting it, and mainstream right-wing party is not able to cut themselves of this development. And in Slovakia, there's also growing nationalism against Hungarians. In Poland, things are getting slightly better. Czech Republic, in this respect, is an exception, because from some reason nationalism in politics seems to be under control, whereas there were like attacks against Sudeten Germans, former citizens of Czechoslovakia before the Second World War, and their groups in their representatives in Germany. This topic sort of fortunately disappeared from Czech politics, so I hope it will stay that way. What is also typical for all these countries is that elites are leaving political scene. I believe that I think that it has been written by many and explained by many sociologists that only such a society can be prosperous and happy, if it can put the best people to its best people to the important positions. So, or a corporation can be like profit making, or a business can be profit making and prosperous if they are sort of putting best people to the position they really understand, in which they are professional and skilled and good. But the opposite is happening. The elites in all these societies are leaving politics. Maybe some people would say that it is normal that elites are leaving politics when the economy is prosperous and there is nothing happening. And if there is a threat coming and society is endangered, that elites would come back to the politics. But it seems to me that if, for instance, in Czech Republic, if you would make a random choice of people from your apartment building or from the bus or the metro car, you would find more interesting people than people who are sitting in the government and representing the government. It would definitely be better government, because if you do this random choice. So even though, to explain better, even though there are people there is a growing number of people in Czech Republic who are coming, for instance, from American universities, British universities. They are coming back to the country. There were no such people after the fall of the communism. No such people are entering the world of politics, but they are not even wanted. Nobody is telling them, come to join politics. So it's again another aspect. So I have to control the time. Okay, so I still have time. So now I would speak briefly about institutions, and I will stay specifically mainly I will be speaking specifically mainly about Czech Republic. So I will start with the central bank, which is a very important institution, and but this institution is currently under threat because we have a system that president of the country is naming all the people to the board of the central bank, which and there are no counter signatures, there are no checks and balances to his act, we are only by the only country in the world which has the independence of the central bank directly in the constitution. But whereas previous President Václav Havel was really trying to think that he would have in the central bank representatives of all kinds of, not all kinds of, but different opinions and slightly different attitudes, and he was really discussing his nominees like with experts and advisors. Our current President Václav Klaus is a harsh critique of European Union, but above all that these are harsh common European currency, the euro, and he is naming to the board of the central bank only people who share his opinions on euro and European Union. Technically, adapting the euro is we have no opt-out, we have no choice, we have to adapt the euro. It's part of our treaty with European Union, but the one who is going to, the institution which will manage this transition, even the timing is a decision of the government, but it will be the central bank who will manage the transition and who will prepare the transition. So you can imagine that if you have the central bank full of Klaus loyalists and harsh Eurosceptics who have to even share his views on global warming, because we have a president who believes that there is no global warming, or that it's or he has this like libertarian attitude that people who speak about global warming are attacking human freedom. So I can give you an example of three who have been nominated into the board of the central bank who published also articles about global warming, sharing Klaus's view on global warming. So I think that whereas this institution was getting quite professional in the 1990s, at the beginning of this millennia, there is a big chance that this institution might be somehow ruined. In case of Constitutional Court, situation is doing slightly different, because it seems that from some reason Constitutional Court there is something like an institutional memory. So even though the president was trying hard once again to find loyalists, he could put there, he didn't succeed that much, especially because he is an economist and he doesn't have any friend among lawyers. And so he maybe put there some people who later betrayed him, or they somehow emancipated out of his influence. So we have few positive examples that even though currently the Constitutional Court, majority of justices is named by current president, the Constitutional Court is able to oppose the will of the president and with quite sophisticated and trustful explanations. So, but President Klaus will have a chance to name more nominees into the Constitutional Court. So there is still a change that this institution also will not work perfectly. I've recently read an article about Russia, which was saying that the situation in Russia should be described that there is no rule of law for the elites in Russia. There is a rule of law for normal people. They have to obey the rules in I don't know if for traffic rules, for instance, and small thieves are punished, etc. But for the elites, for like few thousands of Putin's cooperators, there is no rule of law. And once again, I realized that Russia often serves like a magnifying glass, which helps us to understand ourselves in Central Europe. Because everything is much worse in Russia and everything is in such a much bigger scale. But I was asking myself, do we have a rule of law in Central Europe? So when this is a case of Czech Republic, but by the way, it is similar in other countries, that even though there were major cases of financial fraud in 1990s and it continued, there was we don't still have not a single organizer of these fraud schemes sitting in prison, whereas the number of cases of people who were convicted or charged with corruption is growing. These are like little, I don't know, mayors of little towns, but still there has not been any case of corruption in the city of Prague, which is, by the way, governed for 15 years by Grand Coalition, basically, of all big parties. And there are no cases of corruption in higher politics in parliament. So it seems to me that, to an extent, it's also an example of what is true in the case of Russia. It's also, to an extent, a case of Czech Republic. Police, and especially police, which is in charge of economic crime and organized crime and fraud and corruption, is an institution which people don't trust in our country. Police is definitely misused by political parties. Some of the police units are working for are close to opposition. Some of the police units are definitely close to the government. There are frequently and constant leaks from the police, and especially before the elections. And after the elections, the leaks stop. So they are like, it frequently happens that the tapes from these listening devices of people's conversation on the phone are released to the media. It frequently happens that transcripts of interrogations of particular people are leaked to the media the second day. And so it is clear that police is hugely manipulated, and the situation is not much improving, I believe. Definitely, with the whole chain of justice, starting with police and ending up with judges, there is not enough punishment, and there is no punishment for white-collar crime. I cannot give you any big cases where some really big fish is already sitting in prison. So it's always some way on the way. It always stops. Whereas the media situation with media, unfortunately, I think that media are getting worse, and you might agree that the same thing is happening here. But it's especially an example of small language environment. So in small countries in Europe, always people complain that media are getting worse. But I would say what is the most troubling thing is that there is the investigative reporting and investigative journalism disappeared from Czech media. And it has to do with the management, and it has to do with the ownership. Like most of our media are German-owned or Swiss-owned, and people who publish this media, they run them from the position of an accountant. There's a permanent cost cutting. And they don't realize that media have any social role. So they are picking loyal managers, loyal editors-in-chiefs, and these editors-in-chiefs are not giving anyone time to investigate anything. So all the journalists are writing 2-3 articles per day, and there is no chance that someone would take 2 weeks off to investigate something. Even to get 2 days off is it's something which is not happening in Czech media. I think in this respect, if I'm comparing these countries, situation is better in Poland, because Poland is a big country, so the language environment is better, and all the Polish media are much bigger. So in this respect, I think that Poles have slightly better chances to get better. There is some investigative journalism in our country on public TV, but public TV is under the board of public TV is named by the MPs, so it's sometimes it's being called a parliamentary television. If something really controversial gets out, politicians are getting very angry, and they are trying their tools through the committee. They are naming people to change it. So I think I'm about to finish the presentation. So I was speaking only giving you a very gloomy picture. So I should say something positive also at this end. So and especially about Czech Republic, I think that good thing about Czech Republic is that it's sort of sentenced, unless there is a war or a huge tension in Europe, our country is sort of sentenced to success, even though we're gonna have more and more stupid politicians and more stupid media. Because it's not only because the labor is cheap, but it's also because there are many generations of people working in industry. People in Czech Republic are very skilled, very, very handy. On the other hand, it might be a trouble at the end, because we have too much industries maybe these days, but that's one thing. But it's not only that our position is good for economically. It's also because we are in the middle, so we are in the massage of developed West and cheap competition from the East, and this sort of like massage is always good, and it makes you, it's like a training, it makes you better, and according to due to our position, we will be constantly massaged. And once again, good thing about Czechs is that Czechs, unless Czechs don't scare anyone. Last time we scared someone was under Hussitians, right? It's like the 14th century. And so our neighbors know that we are peaceful, we are not aggressive, and we are not going to attack them. And also good thing about Czechs is that I believe that they are very skeptical, so it's not easy to manipulate them by any kind of fanaticism. So it has good sides and the good part of it and bad part of it, like being they are very skeptical, but they are almost cynical. They don't like their elites, they don't like their but on the other hand, like being skeptical has also a positive. There's also something positive about it. I definitely jump across something, but I think it's just about time to finish, right? So yes, so I would be glad to respond any questions you guys will have.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Let's have questions. You want to take your questions? You want me to call on people? What do you prefer?
Okay, you can call me if you want.
You have a microphone. Yeah.
Hold it close. I would ask for your comment on three questions I have or points that occurred while you were speaking. You talked about the lack of concurrence. There is party
Lack of courts.
concurrence.
I don't really understand. Concord is an abbreviation for constitutional court? No. Or
Lack of agreement.
yeah, consensus, you mean? Okay, like, sorry.
Terribly sorry.
Okay, yeah, it's fine, it's fine. My English is not...
Your parliamentary life is in transition. You're developing a party system of opposition one to the other, which didn't exist before in a true sense. So why should one hope for consensus? I mean, in this period, there's a process of developing a democratic life where the parliament will be one of the checks to make a pun, in the system. The second point is you speak of the safety net, the social safety net, which is another, it seems to me, very difficult transition from what was before under the communist society to one in the context of a market society, and one could not expect this to proceed without a little bit of toing and froing. We're having a great deal of trouble in our country with the social safety net, I might point out. The third point is really more a question, which has to do with the disappearance of investigative media, which I presume you had before in a very important way, or you would not contrast what is going on now with what went on before. So my question is, and you attribute this to foreign ownership of the media.
But, okay.
In part, yeah? Do you have blogs? Do you have internet
okay, so
views which go into the marketplace
okay,
of ideas?
yes. So first question, consensus. I really believe in political competition, and I believe, but there are cases which I was trying to explain it already, but this one little part I have to repeat. If the consensus like that you introduce a new system and then someone else is coming to the power and introducing completely new system. I think that competition should be better, like it's changing the parameters in the system, but the change of the system should be based on consensus. Because if you institute a new system of healthcare with a special role for insurance companies, with a special role for the Ministry of Healthcare, special role for the different varieties of kinds of hospitals, like private hospitals, public hospitals, municipality hospitals, all these interconnections between that, and suddenly a new government comes and dismantles the system, it's extremely costly for the society. So more advantages is if you have competition among political parties about what should be the parameters, what should be the payments for the doctors, how many private hospitals should we have, but not about like changing that one government is privatizing the hospital, second government would say that we will not tolerate private ownership of hospitals, etc. So I think that, I'll give you another example, that there is this government, I believe you Americans don't have value-added tax, but in Europe it's a very important thing. And if you have many rates of value-added tax, it's an enormous space for bureaucracy and politicians and for corruption and lobbyists, because you have special committees of politicians and bureaucrats who are inventing what is going to be in this rate and what is going to be in that rate, and there are thousands of others who control it. If I don't know, to give you an example, the construction is in a lower rate, so if you have a wardrobe in your house which is within the wall, so it's a part of the construction, so it's 5%. If you have a wardrobe which is not part of the wall, it's 19%. So, but I can give you thousands of examples of that. But current government has decided to raise the value-added tax to 9%, which is a way to have one rate in the future, because it must be done gradually. No, and opposition is saying, once we take over the power, we will go back again to 5%, and we will not be heading these rates closer to each other. So, if you have a consensus in important thing, without cancelling the political contest, the environment is more predictable for businesses to plan what they should do and what their costs would be, etc. So that's to this one point. With the social safety net, I'm absolutely for the social safety net, but social safety net shouldn't be wasteful. If it's not wasteful, it can really help those who need it. But our system is that politicians or all the Central European countries suffer from it, that politicians are giving gifts before the elections. They take the money from the middle class in their taxes, but they are giving it back to them in a form of like the pencils for kids who go to the school for the first time. They would get pencils. For the birth of the child, everyone would get this and that amount of money. So I also believe that social safety nets should be constructed in a way that it's motivating people to work somehow. So, but it should really help to those who need it, and it could help them better if it's not giving to everyone, and if it's not taking to the middle class and giving back to the middle class. But this is our trouble. And with investigative media, I should say that at the beginning, we Czechs were those who sold our media to Germans, and it's usually have been us in Respect publication. We started from the scratch and we built a new company. But in case of other dailies, the usual way of privatizing the dailies, it was a typical wild privatization, because it didn't happen even before the privatization legislation was put into place. So these media were basically stolen. And they changed the name slightly, and journalists were sitting in their offices and places, and they just had they had new rent with the owner of the building. But on the other hand, it was good at the time because it helped the media to escape the control of the communists. So there was one daily which was controlled by the Communist Party, second daily was controlled by the communist trade unions, and third daily was controlled by a communist youth organization. So the media, in a wild process, a few months after the revolution, escaped but the new owners, instead of building up a company, they wanted to get rich quick. They wanted to send their kids to study here in the United States, and they sold it. And they, for instance, in case of the most important daily, they sold it to French first, and French sold it to Germans. And so it's not that Germans like hawks jumped on it. We sold it to them, and it's so we can only regret ourselves that we did it. What is special about investigative reporting in our country is that people believe that investigative reporting is that in every daily or every weekly there is one guy who is speaking to police and secret services, and they are giving him packages and he is releasing them. But this is not investigative reporting. So Czechs believe that investigative reporting is, and editors would defend themselves. We have this one investigative reporter, and it's a guy who has his sources within police circles, but it's not. And they are like intentionally giving him pieces of what they want and manipulating him or her. So it's not investigative journalism. So people even don't understand what it is.
Maybe some other questions? Yes, here and then.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of non-governmental organizations in promoting governmental transparency in media.
Yes, it should have been definitely mentioned, but it's a sort of a topic of many people. I also believe that non-governmental organizations are very important and crucial for our societies to flourish. But the situation is improving slightly. But to speak about some positive things, also we have a very good NGO called Man in Need, Člověk v tísni, which is doing a lot of excellent jobs in the Balkans, in all these crisis territories, in Afghanistan and Chechnya. Also, it works a lot in Cuba. It is organizing a perfect, by the way, documentary festival on human rights. And it's sort of like, it's among few things which one can be proud of, and it still didn't transform itself into a huge bureaucratic organization. It's huge, but it's still flexible, and it's really using some Czech traditions of which were coming from Charter 77 and human rights movement. So it is a very positive example. By the way, our president is often, besides that he speaks against, so he doesn't believe in global warming or speaks against environmentalists, he invented this term NGOism. So because he has to be like black and white different from Václav Havel, whereas Václav Havel, for him, the civic society and NGOs were the most important thing. And it's actually amazing about him that even though he has never lived in America, and absorbed how it is important for Americans you can experience only when you live here. He's sort of like he has always lived in a totalitarian society, but he is really in his heart he is really convinced that civic society and NGOs are important. This new president has to be black and white, so he wants he wants people like individuals, and then he wants political parties, and he hates activists and he hates NGOs, and so. But I think that the situation is improving, whatever these people are speaking, but it's improving gradually, and you cannot expect that in little villages, little towns, there are like more and more groups. In some of them every year are emerging people get united on the voluntary basis. So it's really getting better, but it will take generations to heal all all these, or what has been damaged by totalitarian rule, because before communism we had Nazi occupation, etc. So the civic society was destroyed after 1939, which is almost 70 years, right?
Maybe you had another question here.
Hi. I spent some time in Prague, and while I was there, I read that a few years ago the mayor of Ústí nad Labem built a wall separating the Roma community from the rest of the town. So my first question is, what challenges are facing politicians in Prague, integrating the Roma community into mainstream Czech community and moving them out of slums and tenements like the ones in Žižkov and Bertramka into, mainstream Czech society, because there's a huge divide. And my second question is, how has the underground music scene changed since your days as a rocker?
Okay, so a good question. So I think that that this example of the wall, it's also because we wanted to make it to NATO and European Union. We were and there was a lot of criticism from Europe, so the wall was pulled down. But I'm afraid I'm not 100% sure it was happened these days. But it was before we made it into the EU, so perhaps these days it wouldn't have been so easy, because there is no threat that someone would really punish us for doing these things. But on the other hand, from Europe, more people travel to Europe, so people are getting slightly more civilized. But we have a new example of a vice prime minister from the city of Vsetín. His name is Čunek, and he's from small coalition partner People's Party. And he is the guy who has he has never been anywhere. His view of the world is that he has been in Italy on the beach with his family, and this is what he knows about the world. And he doesn't speak any languages. He has been a fire technician in a factory before, and he moved all the Roma people, not Roma. He said that he's moving those people who don't pay the rent in public housing. So he moved them to a new house made of mobile units, which he somehow fixed together, but he also moved some of these families out of town to villages which were even not part of the district, to some rotting houses. He even did it during the night, which was very harshly criticized in the media because of the connotations. But he doesn't stop. When he is on television, they ask him what should we do? Someone is calling there. What should we do to also misuse the welfare? I also want to misuse the welfare. And he says, you should go to some southern countries to get more sun, to get your skin to catch more sun. And then once again, people criticize him, or media criticize him, fortunately. But then he says, I didn't mean this criticism. It wasn't supposed to be about that. I don't mean that only Roma people are misusing social welfare. Also, normal people are misusing social welfare. So it's not that he is politically incorrect. He even doesn't know what political correctness is. He doesn't know if it's good or bad. He doesn't know that it exists. You really have these unbelievable tendencies. On the other hand, it's a good luck that we have Greens in current coalition who are sort of balancing it, because Greens are very human rights oriented and very anti-racist oriented. We even have a special, but it's sort of absurd that we have a special minister for fighting racism, and we have a vice prime minister who is saying these things. So it's really. So what should be done to make it better? I definitely think that. Not in a sense of positive discrimination necessarily, but people should, Roma people should be more accepted into, political parties, to be more like journalists speaking on TV, and all community police, So they should be more promoted into these positions. I think it should be done more, and it's not done enough. But obviously, it's not the only solution for the problem. With the underground music, it's definitely what is underground these days. It's mainly techno in our country, like that people who travel with sound system across Europe, and they are underground these days. It's only that they are not anyhow political at all. They just want to be free, whereas our underground had this good luck that we were also anti-communist, but we were anti-communist because communists were forbidding our concerts mainly. But we had a good luck like that we were kind of a protest, or we were people with kind of protest in your blood, in your nature. So we have a good luck that there was a very bad regime, because if we are 18 and 17, we would definitely be also against something. So young people have it much more complicated these days, because it's not so easy to get to lose some orientation or get some orientation. So our good luck was this establishment was really evil, and there was nothing complicated about it.
I believe we will take a couple more questions. Go ahead. Let's see. Who has a question?
You mentioned that the current president of Czech Republic is a Eurosceptic.
Yes.
So I was wondering if it's the case with the ordinary citizens of Czech Republic. Were they more enthusiastic about the EU membership before 2004, and are they now becoming Eurosceptics? And why is that?
It's not that he is popular because of his Euroscepticism. He is popular because heads of state in Czech Republic are always, or Czechoslovakia, Austrian monarchy, whatever, are always popular. Even some communist presidents, paradoxically, were quite popular. Even Austrian monarchs were very popular. So if you are a head of state, you have like 70-60% guaranteed of popularity. In case of Václav Havel, it dropped for a while because people didn't like that he married his second wife too early. After his first wife, Olga, who was really liked by people, so she died, and he remarried too quickly, so his popularity dropped for a while, but otherwise it would stay the same, I believe. So this president, he has a lot of nationalist rhetoric. He often, because he has nothing to do, so he visits all little towns and villages and listens to people and shakes their hands, and it's on television. He's on television often, but his Euroscepticism is more or less an intellectual libůstka, jak by se řeklo, to je takový slovo. That he's a morsel. Yeah. So it's not for normal. But as far as the EU is concerned, it's all the countries that popularity has dropped a little bit after the membership. But in case of Czechs, the Czechs are always like mumbling. They are always. We are the nation of complainers. Like while we drink beer, like people complain against everything. So, if I don't know, if you have a business and your shop is full of people, you complain that you have so much work. If there are no customers, they would complain that there are no customers. And Czechs are always complaining, so they are not enthusiastic about anything. So it's no surprise that the popularity of the EU is going down a little bit.
Professor Kaus mentioned that you're on the board of Transparency International. Yes. In Czech Republic. There are two kind of same line questions that I have about that. One view of corruption in formerly socialist countries is that it was a survival strategy in a non-market economy. It was a means of getting something one way or another and surviving. Another view is and it's not necessarily antithetical. Another view is that corruption is endemic to some cultures because of certain kinds of beliefs and the lack of institutions that would struggle against it. I wonder if you could say a little bit about your view of that.
I think all of it is true, and I should say that we already spoke about it over the lunch, coincidentally. Though there is, I don't know by heart who invented it, but there is a sort of rule. It's not an invention, it's an observation that if you look at the map of Europe, that the corruption is getting worse to the south and to the east, and getting better to the north and to the west. And we are like caught in the middle, so we have maybe some chance to do something about it, unlike Sicily or southern Greece or Russia. In these countries, they are really determined. It's sort of their fate, it seems. And it will be really, for Russians to announce a victory over the corruption, it's perhaps unthinkable. But on the other hand, there are countries which are able to change it, like absolutely, like Singapore. That you know that there is zero corruption in Singapore because there is a capital punishment for it. That's one thing. And other thing, it's a definition of corruption in Singapore. In Singapore, they consider corruption if you pay a tip in the restaurant, it's a corruption, and you can get canned for this. Really, I'm not joking. And also another instrument of fighting corruption in Singapore is that they have extremely high salaries for bureaucrats, which is also very important. But yeah, that's one of the keys. You are right. But when you ask about, like, it's definitely one part of thing is that you have this survival strategy, this heritage from the communism, where people pay for everything to buy good cigarettes, to buy good vegetables, or some vegetables at least, or fruits, to pay for the visit of the doctor or an operation, and or spare cards for the car, or it was rationed. Economy was based on rationing to an extent, so to jump over the queue you had to corrupt someone. So one thing, this is this heritage. Second thing was that the system was changing, so you had like everything has changed. You must imagine that we lived in a society which has like 99% of GDP was in state hands, whereas these days it's like over 80% it's in private hands. So it was enormous transformation and transition of everything, which obviously is very wild environment to control the discipline. But I think one of the troubles is that, as I was speaking at the beginning, that society is deeply divided, that it's that politicians are saying, like, in the campaign before the elections, they said we're gonna fight the corruption, but they say like we're gonna fight the corruption of this party which is at power, or they said it's we are this party and we are campaigning and we will never have trouble with corruption, but those who are in power have trouble with corruption, and then it turns up. So, and it's very ideological. So whereas our left-wing parties like believe that the tool to fight corruption is like is through a system of punishments. Our right-wing parties believe that you make the state smaller and you have just only like few legislation which is understandable and transparent, and you have small efficient government and transparent legal system, and you have no corruption. So they don't. In Transparency International in our country, we are campaigning a lot that corruption exists quite frequently also in private sector. So you not fight it by making government smaller. So it's I think that it's a fashion among it's good news is that it's a fashion among politicians these days. There should be something done about corruption. The bad news is that they see it only through the ideological glasses.
Now, we have a final question, over there.
Hi. I noticed you mentioned the word elite government for several times. I just wonder how would you define that word, like in East and Central Europe? And my another question is, you said that the president in Czechoslovakia is having like a lot of power on nominating the boards in central bank and somewhere else. And like, is there any opposed forces against that, or you argue that it's like the power is kind of centralized for the president? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So these are good questions. So I think there are maybe after I finish that, Michael will definitely know by heart. There are definitions of elites in sociological books, and there is also a theory which is called prostupnost, byste řekl anglicky, how quickly they can make it up, prostupnost elite. Well, it's also being measured how quickly elites can make it up. You know how they get up to the top of the system. So, but I will give you my own definition based on common sense. It's definitely someone who has an education, and since our schools and universities were so bad under the communism and still are bad under the communism, I would imagine that these are the people who really have some elite education. I believe these people should know something about the world. They should be able to compare what we have in our country, and they should, if they are supposed to solve problems, they should have some knowledge about how the problems are being solved elsewhere. And because one of the troubles about having not enough elites in politics is that people are constantly inventing something, instead of accepting everything has been tried somewhere, and it either worked or it didn't work. And we should, if we have more elites, they would know these things, or they would know that they should travel to find out about these things. But we are constantly inventing the violin. Can you imagine that someone would invent the violin which has 6 strings, and it would be like some kind of a weird triangle? Why? There is a violin that's already been invented. It has a perfect sound, and so I think one part of being part of the elite is that you actually realize that it's not so good so constantly improvise and have something specifically check. But also another part is moral integrity. That the part of being an elite means that you have some moral integrity, and that you can serve as a model, even though if you don't have an education from Harvard or something, that you can serve like a role model in your community, that people respect you. And it's not only that you decided to enter young movement of this and that political party when you were 18, and that's why you became prime minister when you are 45.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite...
Thank you.
Any of you who may still have lingering questions, I'm sure Mr. Machacek will be happy to answer them individually. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you.